Choice Hotels get you more of what you value. Here's a little tune to help you remember. Same drive, different day. Don't you wish you were getting away? Pack your bags and come on through. Texas, Ohio, Alaska, we're up there too. Comfort Inn, it's calling your name. Save on the stay. Oh, and free waffles are yours to claim. Well, I hope you like my little song. Book direct at choicehotels.com.
Good morning, it's Thursday, April 9, and this is the Brussels Playbook Podcast. The vibe in Brussels today is expectant as EU officials consider the odds of a new Hungarian leader around the summit table. Also on the pod, Europe is once again being left to pick up the pieces and pay the bill after a Trump-Iran deal. And the European Commission is giving thousands of 18-year-olds the chance to travel around Europe by train for free. I'm Zoya Sheftalovich, and with me today is our policy editor, Sarah Wheaton.
Thanks for having me here, Zoya.
Thanks, Sarah. Hey, this is a fun one for me because it's my last podcast for a couple of weeks. I'm going back to Australia.
I'm jealous.
You can come in my suitcase. Come see a quokka.
What? I'm almost scared to ask, but what is a quokka?
It is a smiling creature from the land down under. Look it up, everyone. It's super cute. You won't be sorry.
All right.
Well, speaking of things you won't be sorry about hearing about, it's the Hungarian election that is now only 3 sleeps away. Opposition candidate Péter Magyar, he still has that 10-point lead against his rival, the incumbent Viktor Orbán. And it's safe to say a lot of the Brussels bubble is hoping that Magyar wins and, basically comes and brings a new energy to the summit table, Sarah.
Look, he's going to be trying to fulfill a promise that he made on the campaign trail to win back some funding that Hungary has lost from the EU. But it's not going to be so easy, as our colleague Gregorio Sorgi is reporting.
Yeah, this story out this morning basically takes a pretty forensic look about how Magyar may, if he wins, go about unblocking this money under the EU's post-recovery funding. So this is money that Hungary was eligible to receive, but it was frozen over this various rule of law backsliding. But Magyar will only have until the end of August to actually get that money unfrozen. And given there will probably be several months of kind of government formation and coalition stuff and talks, et cetera, which leaves him with very little time to get these big reforms across the line.
Yeah, and it's almost a little unfair for him because when we saw Donald Tusk win back power in Poland, there was so much relief in Brussels that the Law and Justice Party was no longer in power, that they basically just threw the EU funding back at him before he actually enacted these reforms. But now he's been kind of blocked from doing it. And so it's put Brussels in kind of an awkward situation. It was almost like giving Barack Obama the Nobel Peace Prize as soon as he became president and took over from George W. Bush. So there's a desire not to repeat that mistake, and that makes
and the reason that was a mistake was because it was very soon. Donald Tusk hadn't done the reforms.
He hadn't done it.
He hadn't done it. And the European Court of Justice came in and said, oh, hold on a second, I don't think so. And said, no, the Commission did wrong by releasing this money early. So now there is a lot more caution about doing something like that.
Exactly, yeah. So now Budget Commissioner Péter Serafin has told Politico that certain quote-unquote milestones will have to be fulfilled. I think there's something like 27 of them. They include reforming the procurement rules, increasing judicial independence, and academic freedom. But Magyar is going to need 2/3 majority in order to push things through.
Yep, so he'll need that 2/3 majority to remove Orbán-era loyalists. And that's like people who are, lawyers, prosecutors, judges. Like this is a pretty difficult path that he looks to tread, assuming he even wants to tread it. And of course, all this assumes is that he will actually win the election, and that is certainly not a guarantee, though our colleague Max Guerriera interviewed Péter Magyar, who's the guy who ran against Orbán in 2022 and lost, but he reckons that Magyar has a better chance than he did.
Márki-Zay's situation is what's giving all of us caution ahead of this election because, like Magyar, Márki-Zay represented sort of a coalition of opposition parties, and they all united behind him. And he was way ahead of the polls until pretty close to the end, and then he ended up losing pretty badly. But he says that Magyar has learned from his own defeat to do things a little bit better.
Yeah, that's right. And there are a few things that he tells Max that he reckons Magyar has done. So some of those things are, first and foremost, Magyar is a former Fidesz insider. And so he's come in and he's deployed Viktor Orban's party's own tactics against Viktor Orban. So some of those tactics involve being super kind of hardcore. He's come out swinging. He's not taking a position on Ukraine, which is a divisive issue on the campaign trail. He's sort of saying, look, I'm going to keep a lot of the issues that are quite popular among the Hungarian electorate. I'm going to keep the line on those. And he's coming in and saying, I'm going to unlock this EU funding. So he's really fighting very hard. We saw in the campaign various moments over the course of the last few months where, he anticipated the release of this potential tape with compromising material that he might be on and played that on the offense. So he's really coming out swinging. And what Makizai says is, that is how you beat Orban. You have to beat him at his own game.
Yeah, and the other big difference is sort of unlike Márki-Zay, who led a coalition of different opposition parties, Magyar instead created this new party, TISA, pretty much from scratch, and then he pressured all of these other opposition parties to just stand down. His followers sort of went on social media attacks and hounded down other opposition figures. And so he really is the only Orban alternative, like him or not.
Yeah, and that kind of explains why Donald Trump and J.D. Vance have been coming into this campaign in this late stage, just a few days out from this election. We saw J.D. Vance in Hungary on the stump for Orban, getting Donald Trump on the phone. And that's not the only thing. So J.D. Vance, he's actually spoken at the MCC in Budapest. That's that think tank that promotes nationalist, conservative, anti-European views and gets its funding from Orban's government. But speaking of the MCC think tank, that is actually a great link to one of our colleagues, Mari Eccles' stories. So she's written about the way in which, on the one hand, you've got these populist, MAGA-funded think tanks that are doing great, and on the other hand, you've got a bunch of think tanks that are kind of pro-EU, like the Friends of Europe, who are seeing their funding from the European Commission cut due to these various new rules that have been implemented when it comes to funding. So that's a great one to read if you want more on this. Sarah, it wouldn't be Thursday if we weren't talking about Iran.
Would it be any day?
It wouldn't. Not this week. Certainly not this week. Well, not when you've got US President Donald Trump threatening to wipe out a civilization. Well, we have a 2-week ceasefire that's now in place. US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth declared victory, though he did say that US forces are going to remain in the region. But all is not looking rosy.
No, look, I mean, the EU now is in this incredibly awkward situation where, again, they're just sort of reacting. So you have a lot of these countries like France, Germany, and the UK that said, hey, yeah, sure, we will help secure the Strait of Hormuz when the fighting stops. Well, the fighting has stopped at least for 2 weeks, so I guess they're maybe on the hook for that.
Yeah, I think they probably are. And we saw a statement that came out of those countries yesterday after the ceasefire had been announced saying, yeah, we know that we're going to be helping to secure this strait, but the problem is no one actually knows what that means. And, there are some early positive signals. So we saw the price of oil going down pretty sharply. It went from $120 per barrel to around about like that $90, $92 mark. But that's still a lot higher than they were when they were $70 a barrel before this war began. There's just a lot of stuff going on, and what we're seeing is the hallmarks of yet another Donald Trump special surprise, which is where he throws a bunch of stuff at the wall and the EU picks up the tab for cleaning it.
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of the argument about what has happened in Gaza. Also, he didn't start the war in Ukraine, but he's refusing to help. And the EU feels like they're kind of stuck dealing with this by themselves. So on the one hand, you have Trump complaining that Europe or NATO didn't help, that they didn't just give him Greenland. They didn't help secure the Strait of Hormuz in advance. But now he's kind of leaving Europe, NATO members, in a lurch and just saying, not my problem. There's even talk that he might start sort of a joint venture with Iran and Oman to charge money for ships to pass through the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, I read some reports that it might be as high as just a wee bit around that $2 million mark per ship. So that's going to be fun to pay for the consumers who have to buy the oil that's on those ships in the end. Our colleague Nick Vinegar has a great story out this morning, basically looking at this pattern and the way in which the EU keeps having to pick up the tab for Donald Trump. And the irony, of course, is that he's the guy who likes to accuse the EU of not paying its bill for NATO and so forth. I guess he's getting the money out one way or another.
I mean, you have to pay to join the Port of Peace. You have to pay to go through the Strait of Hormuz. So I suspect he can come up with other ways to make Europe pay.
It sounds like a Netflix TV show, reality TV show, How Trump Makes Europe Pay. Sarah, you're from a country that famously doesn't do trains particularly well, although I have spent many more nights on an Amtrak than I care to reveal. What's your train portfolio like?
I'm actually pretty hardcore about trains. I've taken one from Brussels to Copenhagen. Also, you and I have hung out at Davos a few times. And one year I made the mistake of going all the way from Brussels to and from Davos on a train. And I got stuck in Cologne, Germany, and had Deutsche Bahn had to pay to drive me and 6 other people back in a van to Brussels. So that sort of soured me on that experience. But
You're not selling trains to me here.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing is take a plane.
I mean, the view through the mountains is really nice.
Okay, well, listen, if you like that and you are a young person in Europe aged around about 18 right now, you too could be traveling on a train and for free. Did you know that, Sarah?
I didn't, but it's just making me even more bitter about my middle age.
Well, the European Commission has a contest on right now, which is going to be giving away 40,000 free travel passes to 18-year-olds across Europe, and they'll be able to get like up to 30 days of travel for free.
Well, yeah, and so this competition involves some quizzes.
Yeah, it's just like what we were talking about. This is yet another reality TV show. Why isn't Netflix coming to us for production advice?
I mean, I think this is the commission even. So do you want to try it, Zoya? Should I quiz you?
Yeah, quiz me.
Okay. So what are the fundamental values of the EU? A, peace, sports, and culture. B, justice, empathy, and cooperation. C, human dignity, freedom, democracy.
D, great salaries.
Okay. We'll allow it. Okay.
Great. Actually, what is the answer?
It was C, human dignity, freedom, and democracy.
Oh, well, that's pretty good. Those are very, very noble fundamental values. Well, folks, if you're out there and you've got a favorite train journey to recommend to me, I don't think I've ever taken a long train ride in Europe. So please do recommend what I should do. Have you got a favorite trip you've taken? What's the furthest distance you've crossed Europe by train, folks? Send us a message, WhatsApp. The link is in our show notes. And while you're there, send us a rating, a review. Actually, I would love to read some new messages while I'm on a 28.5-hour plane trip back to Australia tomorrow.
Well, I actually have some entertainment suggestions while you're either riding a plane or a train.
Go on.
EU Confidential.
Tell me, what's on this week?
Tomorrow, we are going even deeper into the Hungarian election. We're checking in with a journalist, former trainee of ours, who has spent time speaking with people in the rural areas, the real key voters in the Hungarian election.
The rural jurors, if you will.
The rural jurors, and she has drilled into the TISA strategy there and has some really fascinating insights that we just can't get from our perch here in Brussels.
Well, remember to subscribe, and if you do, you'll get that in your feed tomorrow.
Safe travel, Zoya.
Thanks, Sarah. I'll be back in a couple of weeks, folks. Don't forget me.
Zoya, you are unforgettable.